Everyone, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Glad to see you joining me tonight as we work with hope and the mind, which to me is both fascinating and a little bit terrifying, if I'm honest. Hi, everyone. Great to see you. I had to use all of my nervous system regulation techniques because about 45 minutes ago, I was sitting in my office getting ready for this, and the fire alarms went off. And they just kept going and going. And usually, they stop. It's just a test. But there's a real fire in the building next door to where my office is. And so there were fire trucks everywhere. And even though it wasn't in our building, they wanted us to evacuate. And so I hightailed it home, and I live about 30 minutes from my office. So I was like, I hope I'm home. But clearly I made it, and I was humming on the way home. I was singing on the way home. I was feeling my hands on the wheel. So all those things we talked about last week. So, and I'm here and you're here, and I'm thrilled to be able to share with you tonight our class on the amazing mind. So let's, thanks everyone for your well wishes. Like, way to go, Betsy. I know I was trying to think about other places I could maybe do it. And I'm like, I don't know. I think I just have to get home. So let's talk about our beautiful minds. And before we do that, I do want to say that if you're not in a hope circle yet, or if it's still something that's sort of percolating for you, we certainly are continuing to add people to hope circles. Email us if this is something you want to be involved in. I'm hoping that you are enjoying the 21-day meditation series, and that this is sort of spurring, if you don't already have a committed practice, it's perhaps helping you to start this. And as we go into working with our mind, understanding our mind tonight, this hands down is the best tool for us to work with our minds, meditation, at least in my opinion. And so I'm really so glad that we added this to this Tend Her. And I've been receiving lots of beautiful feedback from people that this has been especially useful to them. Our Hope Summit is coming up here in about a week and a half. It's over halfway full, but we do still have spots, and we do still have scholarships. So please, if this is something that is somehow speaking to you, we would love to have you. And I think Kimberly's on with me tonight, and she can put in the chat the link for that if that's something that works into your schedule and is speaking to you. So let's do just a bit of brief review before we go into all of our new content. We've been really conceptualizing hope as this space or this place where we're holding the seemingly opposite experiences of life, like despair and hope, or grief and joy. That part of working with hope is being able to balance and see and be real with both the light and the dark of our life. That is a necessary piece. And so this is what we keep coming back around to over and over. And last week, and week 2 of Tend Her, we worked with the hope of the body. And the beautiful, really, again, it's hope, the beautiful idea that our bodies are wise and they're self-healing, and they don't lie to us, and they can help us with our decision making. They can ground us. They can stabilize our emotions. So being in the body, at least for me, is the first step, I believe, toward us really being able to heal and show up with more presence in our life. We also did a beautiful bonus session. If you weren't there with us live on last Wednesday night, this is recorded and it's in your Thinkific educational portal. Fanny did this amazing hour with us, talking a little bit more about our nervous system, but more than that, helping us map our nervous system. So helping us, she did just a little experiential thing to help us understand what fight flight feels like to us, what more of like a freeze response feels like, and then what a regulated nervous system feels like. And I got some beautiful new insights for myself about my own system. And the other piece that she shared, which is so relevant to tonight's material, is that our nervous system will respond to the stories or whatever perhaps created that response. And she really encouraged us to just peek at our story, meaning she said, spend 5 to 20 seconds with the story. Otherwise, stay in the body, stay in the sensation. And this is the segue or the bridge to tonight's material, that we are going to be working with our stories. And we're going to be understanding how our stories can limit us, and that it might be beneficial for us to peek at our stories and stay in the present moment versus get so enveloped in our story that then it essentially takes over our life. So, sorry, just adjusting my computer here. Hopefully this is, yeah, okay, that's better. So, your mind. I have to tell you all that of all of the classes that we're doing in this 10 chart, this one was the most, oh, how would I describe it? To me, it felt the most overwhelming, and it was actually the most stress inducing for me. And then I had to add in a fire at my building to get home in time. Um, I think it's because I have had a lot to unlearn about the mind. So after going through graduate study, and in fact, this picture is me holding this small head, the human mind, that I actually bought in college, ironically enough, while I was a psychology major. I was so, interested in the mind. And, I put this in my dorm room. I still have it in my office to this day. As I've gotten deeper into learning about the mind, I realize there's so much for us to unlearn and so much for us to understand. So I spent a lot of time this week with a lot of writing and a lot of notes trying to figure out, what do I want to say about hope and the mind? And I boiled it down to these 8 things. So these are 8 important things that I think we all need to understand about our mind. And some of this will be things you already know. Some of these things may be new to you, but I encourage you to keep an open mind. Maybe you also, similar to me, have to unlearn some things about the human mind and how it works for us and also how it works against us. So, first thing I want us to understand about the mind is that it's connected to the body. We talked about this last week. This is good news, and this is also challenging news. I chose this picture because if our body is bound, if we feel stuck in our bodies, it will be reflected in our mind, and vice versa. If our mind is stuck and bound, it will be reflected in our bodies. So the street goes both ways. And this is important for us to understand. This is important for us to continue to watch how these two things are linked. Last week, when we were in the body, we talked about how our nervous system and potentially the trauma, the stress that can be collective, it can be personal, it can be ancestral, that all of that is really stored in our system. And how do we begin to regulate the nervous system? How do we begin to be more embodied? And these were some of the things we talked about, some of the tools. And so on my drive home, quickly feeling like I was going to just, and I did, I slid in with 8 minutes to go. Some of these things I was working in my car. I was rocking a little bit. I was humming. I was singing a song. I was feeling my hands on the wheel. I was feeling my pelvis in the seat. So these are such essential tools for us, and they really, really, really work. So I'm going to encourage you to continue to practice these and figure out which of these are your go-to. The second thing for us to understand about our mind is that the mind thinks it's in charge. Ah, these cute little minds of ours that believe they are the master rather than the servant. So the very fascinating thing about this one is that and Fanny actually shared this as well in her class last Wednesday night, is that there's more information that travels from our hearts to our minds than from our minds to our hearts. And the electro sort of magnetic energy of our hearts and also our bodies is much more expansive than the mind. So we sort of think our mind is the one calling the shots, and truly our educational systems have set us up this way. We've all been educated into the power of logic and the power of our rational thinking, and our educational systems are beautiful, but they've sort of taught us to rely on the left brain and at the sort of avoidance of the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the heart, the wisdom of our intuition. And so I really truly believe that once we begin to understand that our mind doesn't have to call the shots, that there are far more wise aspects to our being, that we start to use our full capacity. The other thing about these minds of ours, they're always working and they're never satisfied. So the average mind, 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. It's a lot of thoughts. And if you are stressed out, you're having way more than 60 to 80,000 thoughts. So that comes out to be we're having a new thought like every 0.2 seconds. There's very little space between our thoughts. Our thoughts also are very recycled, meaning that what we thought about yesterday is often what we're thinking about today, or what we learned in childhood, or what we learned from what we were told can just stay in our systems and just keep being recycled over and over again. I think I've read somewhere that, 99, there's nothing original about 99.9% of thought. It's all just recycled through our systems. And so part of our freedom that can come from understanding this is also acknowledging that not all of our thoughts are ours. That just like our heart is designed to pump blood through our bodies, our minds are designed to create thought. But it doesn't mean that we have to believe, and we shouldn't believe, every thought that comes across the landscape of our mind. Now, not only does our mind just constantly go all the time, it's also never satisfied. Do you guys ever see this in your own mind? Like you can get all comfy in your couch and then suddenly you're like, oh, I need something else. I got to go to the refrigerator. I need a blanket. It's like the mind is always looking for another way to find some satisfaction. And there's something in the psychological literature called the hedonic treadmill. And the hedonic treadmill essentially says that we will feel euphoria. We will feel that bright sun. We will feel joy, hope, expansion with things like a new car, a new relationship, a new house, a new marriage, even something as simple as a new dress or a new shirt. We get a shot of, joy or happiness. The problem is it never lasts. In fact, research says that the maximum amount of time that we get to feel good, and this seems actually like a pretty long stretch, is 18 months. So let's say we get that new car or that new house for about 18 months. It feels amazing. It's typically less than 18 months, by the way. But then our wiring, we start to drift back to sort of our set point. We all have an emotional baseline. And so after sort of one of these peak emotional experiences, we are going to come back down. And so this is what psychologists sometimes call this hedonic adaptation. We start to adapt to things. So then what do we need? We need more. We need something else that's going to bring us that same hit. Whereas perhaps a better possibility is to get off the treadmill. And some of the things that can get us off this treadmill is gratitude, being able to look around and really see what is already working for us in our life rather than getting in that space of more, 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 more. All right, fourth thing we need to understand about our brilliant mind. We've already talked about this one. I believe we talked about this in class 1 of this Tinder series. That unfortunately our mind is wired towards negativity. And actually it's not really unfortunately because it's something that keeps us safe. But that negativity bias by Dr. Rick Hanson means that we overestimate threats and then we underestimate opportunities and resource. So I can't explain how much this piece of science has impacted me. I catch myself often on a daily basis, finding myself in that negative space. And I have to remind myself, Betsy, this is your brain in that worry rumination space. You need to turn towards more curiosity. You need to turn towards more possibility right now than getting stuck in this mindset of it's not going to work out for me. It's just not going to work out. Now, we all have this. We all have the negativity bias, which means we actually all have to work a little bit harder at things like gratitude and hope and reaching for the good versus getting stuck in the negative. Now, one of the things that also feeds out of this negativity bias is cynicism. I found this book while I was in the midst of my deep dive into hope. Found it in a bookstore while I was in California a couple months ago. I read the whole thing from front to back. It's written by a psychologist and there's beautiful research in it, and then also lots of personal story by this particular psychologist. And cynicism, as described by Dr. I think it's Zaki, it might be Zaki, is that it's the worldview that people are greedy, that people are selfish, and that people are dishonest. So cynicism is the theory that people are greedy, people are selfish, and people are dishonest. So if I all had you in a room with me, we'd all put our hands up. Do you ever feel a little bit cynical? Well, it is according to this book, and I believe it's true as well, cynicism can be very seductive. It is also, unfortunately, somewhat glamorized in our culture, and it's contagious. So if you have a cynical friend who believes that people are selfish, greedy, and dishonest, just being around cynics, we have something in our brains called motor neurons. And so we're very, our brains can kind of mirror the people we're spending time with. So if you have a cynic in your life, it can be something that you start to see in your own life as well, just because of those motor neurons. The other thing about cynicism is that when trust has been taken away, if we don't trust someone, or we can even just think about maybe our culture or our government right now, politics, if we don't trust it, then cynicism usually comes forward. Cynicism rises when trust is sort of depressed or down. And study after study, this isn't going to be surprising to most of you, shows that when we're cynical, um, this kind of eats away at our relationships. It eats away at our communities, our economies, and our society. So staying away from cynicism is an absolute step towards more hope. And the story from this book that stuck out to me the most was this author's description of how they were an avid Twitter user, so that they got onto Twitter early on in its inception. And as an academic, they love to counter things and argue with people via Twitter. And it became something they turned to on a very regular basis. And then in the writing of this book, they decided to go off of Twitter, which I know is now called X, but I'm still calling it Twitter. And they first went through withdrawal. They felt sort of itchy and irritable and felt like they were sort of out of the loop. And then as time wore on, they realized how much more space they had, how much more joy they were finding in down moments, and how much their well-being improved by going off of Twitter. They also cited a study in this book that I want to share with all of us, that in this study, they had 3,000 people and they paid them to shut down their Facebook accounts for 4 weeks. You can imagine. Can you imagine not being on Facebook, or being, some of you aren't on social media, but if you are, if you have done social media or it's a part of your life, this study showed that by people going off of Facebook for 4 weeks, they lowered their depression rates by about 25 to 40%. And y'all, that's very high. It's comparable to going to therapy. Now, I'm not suggesting that going off of Facebook is equal to therapy, but I am saying there's potentially a link here between our mental well-being and how we use our time, and whether our time is sort of linked into what can be negative spaces. The other thing that I really took from this book that was fascinating to me is this. So in this book about cynicism, he shares a website called solutionsjournalism.org. And I didn't know about this, but I guess there are a fair amount of journalists that are working with what's called asset-based journalism, meaning they're trying to write journalistic stories based on what's going well. Because we all know that what sells in journalism is all the problems and all the bad stuff. And there needs to be a little bit more of a counter, right? Can we hold the tension of opposites? Can we hold bad stuff happens, good stuff happens? And so this particular website, and I've actually done a fair amount of poking around on this website, and it's quite good, is stories written by journalists that are focusing on how people are creatively solving problems. So the author of this book says that what he does now is he still checks the New York Times, he still checks the news outlets for what's going on in the world, but he balances it by also having this as part of his news time. So also looking at what's right in the world. And I feel like this is really powerful and really important for us to take into consideration, that to really find this holding of the tension of opposites, especially around news consumption, that we may need to balance it with some more positive based stories. So I really like this site, and I thought to myself, I gotta make sure that I share this with all of you. Okay, the fifth thing that I want you to know about your mind is that your mind ruminates. No surprise there. We all know that. And our mind is really, really good at creating story and also holding on to story. So, this beautiful picture of a brain on the left, the parts of the brain that are lit up here are called the default mode network. This research on the default mode network is pretty new within the last 20 years. And researchers just happened upon the lighting up of these brain structures when they were doing studies asking one group to do a cognitive task where they're asked to think or read or answer questions. And then the control group is asked to just sit there and do nothing. Well, we all know our brains are very busy and full. And so we don't just sit there and do nothing. So when we're asked or when we're in a space that we're not at a task, so let's say our mind is just sort of wandering or we're daydreaming, these three structures in the brain tend to light up. So researchers have now called this the default mode network. So the parts that are lit up on this brain, for those of you who are neuroscience geeks like me, it's the medial prefrontal cortex, it's the posterior cingulate cortex, and then it's the inferior parietal lobes, which are on both sides, those two spots that look the same on the left and the right. And all of these parts of the brain are connected to our autobiographical memories. So they're connected to our stories, the memories we have of our first day of school, our first kiss, what happened last week with our partner. They're based on past memories. And so when we let our mind wander, so when we're not engaged in a task, and we're not focused on something in front of us, this lights up our default mode network. And memory is really important again for survival. Our brains are completely wired for us to stay alive. The problem with it is that staying alive doesn't always equate with great well being in terms of our brain structures. So, what happens in this default mode network is that we get into this rumination cycle. And unfortunately, research shows that when we are more in default mode network states like this brain, things like depression and anxiety seem to be higher. So, as one researcher put it, and I think this sums it up really well, a wandering mind is not always a happy mind. So, this leads to us thinking about what's our story? Where does our mind go when we're in this default mode network? So, there was a great, what would we call it? A story, a folk tale that seemed to circulate. I noticed it around the time of the pandemic. That's when I first read this or heard about this story. And some of you may know this, but I think it articulates really well the dilemma of the mind, the dilemma of the fact that our mind ruminates and creates story. So this folk tale goes like this. A Native American grandfather was speaking to his grandson about violence and cruelty in the world and how it comes about. He said it's as if there are two wolves that are fighting within his own heart. One wolf can be vengeful and angry, and the other wolf can be very kind and understanding. The young man asked his grandfather, well, which wolf wins in your heart? And the grandfather wisely answered, the one that wins is the one that I choose to feed. So my question for you is, what wolf are you feeding? right? Do you feed the fear? Do you stay in fear? Do you stay stuck in all that's going wrong in the world, all that's going wrong in your life, all that's going wrong with your friends and your parents and all of that? Or can you focus more on what's happening that's really good? I think this is our biggest challenge is what wolf do we feed? And until we can sort of gain the capacity to witness our thoughts, witness our stories, understand what's constantly sort of playing in the background of our life, it's hard for us to move more towards hope. So I'm going to have you stay with this idea of which wolf are you feeding and lead it into a little bit more of a personal question, which is, what's your story? What is the story of your life? Um, and I guess to clarify it a little bit more, what is the story you tell about yourself? Are you the heroine of your own story? Or do you find yourself getting stuck more in this story of being the victim or being the one who's left out or being the one who never has enough? It's so useful for us to begin to get more clear on what your story is. And I'm already imagining on Friday, our narrative therapist, Andrea Wilson, she's going to go nuts with this idea because she's all about understanding our story, writing our story, and then also beginning to realize we are the author of our own story. We have agency in all of this. Now, the piece I want to share with you that is based in some research and some theory is that it is important for us to speak our story. It's important for us to understand our story. And we could also replace the idea of story with it's important for us to understand our emotional history. And we got into this a little bit last week because I asked you to really think about what are you carrying in your body that could be from the collective, the toxicity of the collective, what's in your body from your lineage, your family of origin, and then what personal things are stored in your body. And so the same sort of goes for the mind. What are the stories you've taken on from culture, from your family, and then from the life that you've lived up until this point in time? Now, what I found most fascinating about story is that yes, it is highly powerful and useful to speak our feelings and thoughts and story to a trusted other, whether that is a dear friend, whether that is a partner, whether that is a professional like a therapist or a coach. However, there becomes a moment or there becomes a time when the retelling of our story, especially if our story is a traumatic one, or especially if our story revolves around feeling like we are the victim, that there is a place when telling that story again and again and again, it's as if it wires it a little bit more deeply into our system. And so then we get stuck in that story instead of realizing that we have this capacity to keep writing the next chapter and the next chapter of our life. So the research, and I really tried to find this, it's related to some of the work of Norm Farb, who is a researcher who does a lot of work on embodiment. And but I couldn't get my hands on the exact article. I'm still looking for it. But it's the idea that after about 3 or 4 times of telling a traumatic story, it loses its usefulness. So after that, it's just like we keep wiring it in deeper. So if we stay in that victim story, we just perpetuate our own pain. And so, yes, it's important to face what maybe was traumatic in our story, but to also not choose to stay there because it becomes our identity. So this again is something for you to really sit with. What is the story about myself? So yes, maybe there was a trauma, but did I turn that trauma into some sort of post-traumatic growth versus staying in victimhood? So I encourage you to sit with this, talk to other people about this, write about this. And again, I'm really interested to see what Andrea is going to add to this conversation when her video comes out on Friday. And of course, Ram Dass, who is a psychologist and a spiritual teacher, a yogi, a meditation teacher, he writes that everything changes once we identify with being the witness of the story rather than the actor in the story. And during our week 1, I did a Wisdom Wednesday that's in your educational portal on our shadow, working with our shadow. And I did an experiential exercise in that video that worked with imagining that we're watching sort of a trauma or what got us stuck in our life playing out on a stage. So it's a technique that allows a little bit of distance so we can sort of see where our story might be coming from or what our story is. And then this piece is really important, and that's what we did in that exercise as well, is we just witnessed it. We weren't the actors playing that out on the stage. We were just witnessing it. And we can witness what our story is rather than being the story. It changes everything. So that might be another tool to go back to if you have not already done it. It's the Wisdom Wednesday on working with shadow. And again, it's in week 1 of this Tend Her program. All right. The 8th thing that we need to understand about our mind, and that is that it is malleable. Such good news, y'all. The gray matter of our brain, it is able to be self-revised. So our brains get to change. We don't stay stuck in the same stories. We don't have to stay stuck in the same stories. We don't have to stay stuck in the same past traumas. We don't have to stay stuck in the same identities. We have this capacity to change our brains. Now we can't erase the things that happened. So the phrase here is often we can't erase, but we can replace, meaning we can learn new stories. We can learn new behaviors. We can learn new ways of being in the world. And that seems to get louder than the original pattern. And then we start to be different in our lives. So it's a powerful thing to know that no matter how old you are, yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks. It is possible for all of us to change how we think, to change what we believe, to change our stories, to change what we focus our awareness on. There is great capacity to bring something different into our mind, should we desire that. So this is key. So yes, our brains are definitely malleable, but there are certain things that make neuroplasticity, which is the official term for a malleable brain, that make neuroplasticity more possible. So the first thing is, what is the state of our nervous system? This goes back to last week's conversation. This goes back to Fanny's mapping of the nervous system. So when our nervous system is calm and relaxed, this is the time when we can change our brain. The other thing we have to know about neuroplasticity is it doesn't change overnight. We have to be consistent. This is one of the reasons I had you, or I'm having you, work with 21 days of meditation. By the way, there's some amazing research on how quickly our brains change in as little as 7 hours of meditation, which you're definitely going to get over the course of that 21-day meditation. There are already beneficial shifts and changes in your neuroplasticity. So We don't have to be meditating for 10 years to reap the benefits. We can meditate for 21 days and see changes in our patterning and our thinking. And then last but not least, there's an idea with neuroplasticity that what fires together wires together, meaning that the things that we sort of connect get stronger. So if we start to work with some of those nervous system regulation techniques. So let's say when our mind starts to race, we stop, we place our hand on our heart, we start to rock, we start to hum, or we start to sing to ourselves. We're starting to wire that, oh, when my mind goes into a space of rumination, I can actually shift it and change it with this sort of technique or this tool. So there are ways, these are the conditions essentially that help us create a new wiring in our brain. And it really is like our brain has this superpower to shift and change, but it takes effort. And, we're doing these 4 weeks together. You're doing 21 days of meditation together. To have a healthy mind, it takes effort. Left to its own devices, our mind is negative. Our mind is going to see everything that's wrong. Our mind is going to ruminate. And so, just like left to its own devices, if we don't take care of our body, it gets out of shape. We put on weight. We feel fatigued. Our health goes down in the dumps. It's the same with the mind. If we don't work with its capacity to move towards hope, to move towards a calmer nervous system, to move towards new patterning, it's going to stay in a relatively negative space. So, knowing these things that we're talking about tonight is really essential, and it's that commitment. So, we've also talked about hope is not just passively sitting by saying, "Oh, I hope my brain makes some new, better neural connections." No, hope is action. Hope is, I see that I'm stuck in a really old story of being a victim. And I'm going to actively work on changing that story so that I am not stuck in the tyranny of the past anymore. I'm going to engage in new things that calm my mind, calm my nervous system. And I'm going to stay with it. I'm going to keep practicing. I'm going to give it more than just a couple days. So this is how we start to create a stronger and a healthier mind. So not only is the mind malleable, but our minds are so dang creative. They're also so curious. I've showed this picture on the left in so many of the classes I've taught over the years. I don't know who the artist is, but I love this picture so much. It shows our left brain as sort of these sterile cubicles. Does anybody work in one of those, right? Where the left brain is linear, it's analytical, it's logical, it's task oriented. But there's these beautiful bridges that go across into the right brain. And the right brain is filled with color and play and present moment awareness and meditation and creativity and curiosity. Now, most of us, because of the culture we live in, last week we talked about the toxicity of our culture. We all have been very trained to be left brainers, right? Where's the logic? Where's the science? Where's the results, right? Our culture has, given us a lot of reason to focus in on those things. And they are beautiful and powerful. I do not mean to diss the left brain. I love my left brain. And if we can learn to grow and develop our right brain in the same way that we've worked through our educational system to develop our left brain, we're going to have a much more balanced perspective of life. So our right brain, if you're a creative, you already have quite a developed right brain, but creativity is in all of us. It's not just in the artists and the musicians and the children. It's in all of us. There's a really fascinating phenomenon called acquired savant syndrome. I'm going to say that again, acquired savant syndrome. So we all have heard about that there are sometimes savants. Often it can be associated with autism, but they have this like amazing skill that's like beyond what anyone can imagine. So acquired savant syndrome is when someone, actually it's very rare, but it happens when someone has something that happens to their left brain. So maybe it is a stroke, maybe it's an accident, but something happens that causes damage to that left logical, rational part of the brain. What happens in this acquired savant syndrome is that people develop the most amazing creative abilities almost overnight. Almost overnight. So there's a story of a surgeon who in 1994 was standing at a telephone, standing at a payphone, which of course we don't have those anymore, but in 1994 we still had those. And he was struck by lightning, and the lightning struck his left brain. What happened after this lightning struck, and he was okay, he recovered, but he developed this incredible musical talent. He had never studied music in his life. He had been a science rational guy. He started to study music and started to buy a piano and began hearing all of this music in his mind all the time. He started to write music. He started to, publish music. So he was still doing his work as a surgeon, but suddenly his right brain had come alive. There's also, I'm going to tell you a second story because I find this so fascinating. Because how many of us have said, I'm just not a creative type. I don't know how to paint, or I don't know how to do these things. So the next story is of a pilot, and his name was Ivan Schultz. And he flew those very small, like prop planes, which when you work or when you fly a prop plane, you actually have to get out sometimes to start it. And he got too close to his prop, the propeller, and it actually carved out about half of his left brain. He actually also recovered. He went through a lot of physical therapy, he went through a lot of work to rehabilitate his left brain. And when he was in some of his physical therapy, they had him working with clay as a way to sort of bring back some of his motor movement and get some of his hand strength back. And he discovered that he was a brilliant, he could do this, right? This is his work. He became this brilliant sculptor. He's got a really, if you just Google Ivan Schultz, he's got a really beautiful website. I picked this one. There were so many beautiful sculptures that I could have put on this slide, but I liked this one called The Spirit Seeker. But he's got this amazing website and all this amazing sculptures that he's created since this accident happened. So this idea, what this suggests to all of us is that we all have creativity already in us, right? It's not something we have to go out and find. It's already in us. We just have to uncover it. And we don't have to go through a major accident like a lightning strike or getting hit in the head by a propeller. We already have creativity wired in us. So this is good news to all of us. And creativity doesn't just have to be in the arts. Creativity can be how you arrange flowers, how you cook food, how you dress, how you write letters to people. There are so many ways for us to engage more of this present moment part of our brain. So the brain is inherently creative. It's also inherently curious. And we know this. If you have any children in your life, you know they're constantly asking, why? And then somewhere along the line, for some of us, curiosity can get a little bit dampened. We just don't find ourselves learning new things. Some of you may be already inherently curious about a lot of things, but if you feel like your curiosity has gone a little bit stale, I have two sort of encouraging pieces here. And the first thing is just to say, So I'd like you to do that. And as you say, I'd like you to see what you feel in your body, what you notice as you say, So this little trick, is from a Yale-trained psychiatrist named Judson Brewer, and I can get that in the chat later. He wrote a book called Unwinding Anxiety. And in this, he writes about this simple phrase, that when we say it, it piques our curiosity. So let's say, like the other day, I had this check engine light come on. It said some fluid in my car was down. And so I opened the hood of my car and was looking, I'd read in my manual. Now, I did not say, I think I grumbled probably under my breath. But the idea is if we can bring that attitude of, I wonder what's going on here. I wonder what's really happening here. It can shift us into this curious mindset and actually move us towards more possibility. I truly believe that we are in a place in our world where we need creativity and curiosity to begin to shift us to new solution. That if we're stuck just in this left side of the brain, I think it was Einstein who said you cannot solve a problem with the same mentality that created it. So for us to solve some of these really big problems, climate change, where we're at in our planet, we may need to work more from that place of creativity and imagination and curiosity. Now, the other thing that can revive curiosity, and this comes from Martha Beck. I love Martha Beck. I think she's Harvard trained, not Yale trained, but she's Harvard trained, a sociologist. She's got so many phenomenal books, and she has a new book out on anxiety as well that I really, really recommend. And her piece of how do we revive curiosity in our system is to just ask yourself, how can I feel better? Like, how could I feel better? Like, what would make me feel better right now? And allow your curiosity to open up and take you wherever it wants to take you. The deal with both curiosity and creativity is that they're in us already. Again, we don't have to go outside looking for something. It's already wired in us, which I think is so powerful for us to know. Last but not least, and this is the best news of the night, I think, is that your mind can quiet down. So even if you are having 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, it is possible for us to slow our thoughts down so that we actually have less thoughts a day, or we have more space between our thoughts. So this is an image of what happens when we meditate. And you all, if you're doing the meditation challenge with us, I think today was day 11 or day 12. So we're over a week and a half into this challenge. Whenever we meditate, this is what happens. This is a crude image, really, of what happens. So each of those green boxes is a thought. The longer we're meditating, there seems to begin to have more space in between each of those thoughts. So that means you're having less thoughts a day. That space between the thoughts, at least in the meditation world, is often called a gap. And we're looking for more gap experiences. We're looking to be in the gap more often. Why do you think we're wanting to be in that gap space? And I'm actually going to stop my share and look at y'all and look in that chat box. Oh my gosh, there's 57 chats. We'll see if I can see. I'm not going to be able to look through all of this, but I want to know, what do you guys think is in that gap? And those of you who have worked with me in the past totally understand that you know this question, because I've asked you this question many times. Yes, there's peace, there's creativity. What else? What else is in that gap? There's calm, there's quiet, there's stillness, there's harmony. You guys are good. There's hope. Yes. There's freedom. There's possibility. Walter, yes, this is what I was waiting for. This is so all of those things are right. All of those things are right. Walter or Peterson, whoever you are, me is in the gap. So that's exactly right. What's in that gap between our thoughts is us. And not the us that gets stuck in rumination, not the us that gets stuck in negativity bias, not the us that even has an identity. What's stuck in that gap, or what's not stuck in the gap, what's in the gap is us, our true nature, who we really are. And who we really are is all of these things you put in there: peace, wisdom, joy, calm, empowerment. That's what's really in that gap space, which is why, again, meditation, which allows for more space, and it's infinitesimal, by the way, right? I've been meditating. I committed to a daily meditation practice about 9 or 10 years ago, and I've stuck with it every morning. Sometimes it's as quick as 5 minutes. More often, I try to meditate for about 15 to 20 minutes every single morning. And absolutely what I found is, can I tell when I'm in the gap? Not really. So this is kind of a trick here. You only know that you've been in a gap when you come out of it. Because in the gap, there's no thought. There's just space. And there's a connection with self. But as soon as I have the thought, oh, I made it to the gap, I must be in the gap, boom, we pop out of it because there's the next thought. But the idea is, with meditation, we just grow bigger gaps. And in that gap space, we meet ourselves, not our ego self, not who we've been told we are, but our true, real self. That's absolutely what we find in that gap. So when people ask me, well, what have you gotten out of meditating daily for 10 years? Yeah, I'm sure my stress is better managed. I'm sure that there are some mental health and physical health benefits, as the research would suggest. But I do feel like what has come out of it is just a deeper sense of knowing me. But what I know from those years of meditation, I couldn't necessarily articulate it. It's more of a felt sense of like, I just am more connected to myself. So I want to end today's class. That went quick, already at 7 o'clock. I want to end tonight's class with an image and another story. I think we learn so well from story, and we learn so well from image. So this last little piece is going to hopefully tie up some of what we've done tonight. And those of you who have been in other classes with me, I've shared this story before. So I encourage, if you've heard this story, to use beginner's mind and maybe hear or feel into something new for yourself. So this is the Golden Buddha. And this Golden Buddha is actually pure gold. So it's not plated gold, it's pure gold. And it's thought to weigh about 5.5 tons. It's actually in a temple in Thailand. So this is a real massive 5-ton golden Buddha. But there's a very fascinating story that goes along with this Golden Buddha. And it's the idea that several hundred years ago, this Golden Buddha sat in a temple, and they were told, word came to this temple that they would be invaded soon. There was an army on its way and to prepare themselves for an invasion. So the monks living in this temple were quite smart, and they covered this 5-ton Golden Buddha with mud and concrete. So it just looked like a big stone Buddha, so that any invading army would not perceive that there was any value associated with this massive statue. So sure enough, the army rolled in, and they passed by this big, massive stone Buddha. They had no reason to plunder it, even though they plundered many things from many temples in the area. And the army actually stayed, or the invaders stayed, occupied this village with the now stone-covered gold Buddha for many, many years. And even though the Buddha stayed, time wore on for so long that it was actually forgotten that there was gold. So the people in that temple died, life went on, and the big now cement Buddha was put into storage. The timing of this happened at about, they think that it was about 2,500 years. They think that the Buddha is about, no, excuse me, let me start this over. 1954, this Buddha that's covered with cement is in storage. And they're transporting it from the storage. I don't know where they were transporting it. But one of the people doing the moving of this massive, now concrete covered Buddha, parts of the concrete were starting to fleck off. And what they noticed was gold underneath it. They started to chip away, and boom, this is what they found. So the timing of this discovery in 1954 was almost exactly 2,500 years after the death of the Buddha. And so the Buddhists find this golden statue as a miracle, right? A miracle that it was brought back to life, so to speak. So why the heck am I showing you a golden Buddha? I'd like you to consider and think about that your mind is like the golden Buddha. Your mind is, actually, let's even take it deeper. Your soul is like this golden Buddha. That who you really are, your true nature, your natural self, is this beautiful golden Buddha. It's filled with power, it's filled with love, it's filled with compassion. It is wealthy beyond measure, who you truly are. And then life comes along and it covers us with cement and mud. Life comes along and disconnects us from our truth, which is golden. Disconnects us from who we really are, which is abundant beyond measure. And we forget it. And people around us forget it. And so us reconnecting to the truth of our nature requires a chipping away of the stories, of the thought forms, of the busyness, of the situations that drain us. It's a constant chipping away for us to actually get to the truth of our nature, which is so beautiful, so powerful, so abundant, so wise. So please remember that who you really are is this golden Buddha. That's your true nature. All right, my friends. That was an hour, more than an hour of talking. Thank you for joining me tonight as we explored the mind, and hopefully these 8 sort of things to know about the mind. Some of them I'm sure aren't new, but it's a good reminder to all of us. The other thing that the mind does is we get, and many of you have done practices with me, we've talked about this, that there's this remember forget dance. It's always going on. Like, we remember our true nature. We remember that we are wise. We remember that we have deep compassion and guidance inside of ourselves. And then we forget. And then we're back in small self, stuck in the rumination, stuck in the problems, stuck in the stress. And so it takes us committing. And I think that's the real message of Tend Her Hope, is that hope is action. Hope is not sitting back and just believing something better is going to come along. Hope is taking the agency and going for it, doing the practices, choosing to work with the mind, making decisions about how you treat your body, doing all of these things that lead to you being able to move towards more well-being, more optimism, believing that the future could be better than everything's going downhill. Okay. Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm glad to hear that some of you had some aha moments in this. I'm going to stay on for questions. I'll stay on up to 8 o'clock for anyone who has questions, wants to ask anything, wants to share anything. I should have said this at the beginning, but if you do have questions, it helps to put stuff in the chat box. But I think maybe Kimberly was helping me with this. So one of the questions was, who said, how can I feel better? This is, now the name is gonna be gone for me, Michelle, who asked this question. She's a coach and a mindfulness teacher, Martha Beck. She's the one who suggested, when we're working with curiosity, that we ask ourselves, how can I feel better? Martha Beck is the author of that. Yeah, thank you, Emily. Got that before me as well. Is the negativity bias thrown into overdrive during periods of great uncertainty and stress? Absolutely, 100% for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we're in nervous system dysregulation, we are which means our whole system is like, am I going to stay alive? Am I okay? I'm stuck in this fight, flight, freeze space. And when we're in that space, absolutely, our brain is going to be even more focused on what's wrong. There's not enough opportunity. There's not enough resource. And what I brought up in last week's class, and this is the work of Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, I talked about him last week, is that we're living in toxic times. We're living in a toxic culture. Our culture is not normal. Our culture is not healthy. And so just being in a culture where we're getting pummeled by news, we're getting pummeled by, a lot of hard stuff right now. We're in a massive, I think, big shift change in our whole culture. Absolutely, our brain is going to veer more towards what's wrong, which again, it's not problematic per se when we know it. When we don't know it, it can be problematic. But when we know that, oh yeah, I'm really stressed. So I'll be completely honest with you guys. Running Tend Her is major stressor for me. So I have not been in my most nervous system regulated state for the last couple of weeks because there's so much to stay on top of. But I know that I am more short-tempered, that I am more frustrated, like that fire alarm that happened today. I was way more frustrated than I would have been in other times of my life where I have more space and time for, caring for myself. But I know that. I know I give myself more grace when I'm under places of stress because I know my mind is going to veer towards rumination and negativity. So, what can I do to counteract that? How can I spend a little more time in meditation? On my way home in that car, right? I'm rocking, I'm humming, I'm talking myself down off of that ledge of worry and rumination. So when we know that we're stressed out and we're going to be more negative, we can also share that with friends and family. That's another thing I've done in the course of this last month. If I said to people very close to me, I've got some boundaries up this month. I don't have as much time. I don't have as much energy. I don't have as much bandwidth for you. So don't take it personally. This is just where I'm at. So that's important to know. Diane asks, what were the first two things to know about the brain? I think the first thing to know about the brain is it's connected to your body. And then the second thing to know about your brain is it thinks it's in charge. But actually, it's not. There are more messages coming from your heart to your brain than your brain to your heart. So, Margaret asks, are the 60,000 thoughts repeated during the day, or are there actually that many different thoughts? Margaret, I have no idea, but my guess is that they are a lot of recycled thoughts. So we're ruminating and thinking and going over things over and over in our minds. So my guess is it's not 60,000 different thoughts. It's a lot of the same thoughts, just repeated. It's like the background music in our conscious awareness, or it's very unconscious actually. It's just a repetition of the same songs over and over and over again. Yes, someone wants to go back to, I have a fellow neuroscience geek here. Let's go back to that slide of the brain. And I'm going to show you the parts of the brain that are the default mode network. So at the very front of the brain there, so the front of the brain is at the top of the slide. That's the medial prefrontal cortex. And then the big part, the big thing at the bottom of the brain, that's the posterior cingulate cortex. And then the two little dots on either side, those are the inferior parietal lobes. So those are all part of what's called the default mode network, and they're the parts of our brain that really register episodic memory. So essentially our stories. Lisa asks an interesting question. If there are more signals that go from the heart to the brain, what is the brain doing that hides them or overrides them? The brain isn't necessarily overriding them. The brain is receiving them and then processing them. But the idea is, and this comes from, and maybe Kimberly, you can get this in the chat box. It comes from the Heart Math Institute, which is a nonprofit out of California that really studies the idea of heart coherence. It's also the idea that when we breathe together, when we collectively work with breath coherence, we sort of create deeper alignment between our mind and our heart. They're doing really fascinating work. And they've actually done a fair amount of research showing that our heart has a very strong electromagnetic, it's very broad, it's much bigger than our mind, and that there is more information going from the nervous system, the heart, even the gut to the brain than the brain telling the body what to do. So it's almost like the body is picking up a lot of information. There was also an interesting research study out of the University of Iowa, a researcher named Antonio Damasio, who's no longer at Iowa. But he also did a really interesting study that showed it was like a card game simulation. And he had the body all hooked up to all kinds of different measurements. And the body actually knew what was going to come up on the card before the mind did. Meaning that this goes back to our conversation last time, the body is so wise and the body is picking up information from the environment almost more than the brain is. So the body is picking this up and then it's sending messages to the brain. And the brain is making decisions and choices and actions from that. But the point is that the body is almost in a way more tuned in to things going on around you than the mind. So the body is sending lots of messages to the brain than the other way around. I hope that makes sense. Oh, Michelle, I love that Michelle is sharing this. There's an Iowa Public Radio series. I love IPR so much called the Sunnyside Project, which consists of positive stories about Iowans, something people can submit ideas for and lives on the IPR website. Thank you for sharing with us, Michelle, this idea of bringing in positive stories versus just reading all the bad stuff that's happening around us. Walter, thank you. Walter's saying here too that he believes the HeartMath has recorded the heart field extends up to 8 miles beyond us. So the energy of our heart is extending out 8 miles. And Alice, thank you, is talking about what I was saying before, heart, mind, breath coherence. It's 5 counts in and 5 counts out for 5 minutes, 3 times a day, increases this heart mind coherence. There's also a piece with this heart mind coherence, bringing in gratitude is also a big piece. So it's working with breath, but then really visualizing and seeing what's working for you in your life. Maybe I'll put in our notes from tonight's class, the links to the HeartMath Institute, and also a heart mind coherence practice for you as well. It's powerful stuff. Okay. Another good question this week from Alexandra Alley. Thank you for your question. So how do we balance putting our attention on the acceptance of the present moment while also desiring and envisioning a different future? Should we try to intentionally oscillate? Ooh, that's a good one. So I don't think we have to be so conscious of it. So, like we don't have to think like our brains are doing the oscillation on their own. Now, remember, according to the Default Mode Network, that when we're in a place where we're not focused on a task, we're not focused on the present moment, we're not focused in our body, our mind is just sort of wandering, the mind is going to go back into the past. It's going to go back into that episodic memory. And that's where we can get stuck a little bit. So there is great power clearly in landing in the present moment, which looks like being with our breath or being in our body, because of course our body and our breath are always in the present moment. So that's a really powerful way to land here and now, as I can feel my body sitting in this chair, my feet on the floor, I can connect to my breath. That's putting me in the present moment. And as we're talking about creativity and curiosity and imagination, by the way, Kimberly, if you can put in the web chat, I also did a Wisdom Wednesday, I think 2 months ago, on curiosity, creativity, imagination. So I actually believe that those are the tools that are going to help us get out of this quagmire we're in, and also in our own life, that if we can really develop and work with curiosity, creativity, imagination, because of course, also brain scans show that we can just imagine ourselves playing basketball, and the same parts of the brain that light up when we're doing that task also light up just when we use our imagination. So, imagination is extremely powerful. And so, I do think it's a really useful tool to work with your own imagination. This can look like as something as simple as I am going to envision myself in a safe space. Some of the meditations we've done have been working with envisioning imagination. We did a inner healer meditation that had you imagine your inner healer. We've got some other imagination based meditations coming up for you in this 21-day series. So I don't think you have to think about it as an oscillation. In general, trying to stay in the body and stay in the breath and working with mindfulness is powerful to keep us in this present moment. But also, a powerful practice is using your meditation practice to envision, or using your journal to envision and intend. I would like this. I see this in my future. So both are powerful, but I don't think you need to intentionally oscillate. I wouldn't even know how to intentionally oscillate. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and Dawn says, thank you for that question. She, I think, clarifies this in another direction, which I like, is that I've been yo-yoing between acceptance and discontent with what is going on right now in the here and now in our society. Exactly, Dawn. That's exactly what we do. So this is, I think, I'm always doing this in this class, but this is exactly what I'm talking about when we're working with paradox and when we're working with hope, and really when we're working with our life, is that this is what it looks like. Is sometimes I'm in acceptance, sometimes I'm in resistance, sometimes I'm in discontent, sometimes I'm in joy, sometimes I'm in despair, sometimes I'm in hope. That it's all there, right? And we don't want to say, I'm going to shut out hope and anger and judgment and frustration. We can't. It's part of our human experience. Remember, we talked about toxic positivity. If I just focus on the light and I just focus on everything that's happy, I'm essentially just in denial. I'm not really working with life. So life is this, right? And so there is kind of a yo-yo that happens. That's actually a really good way to describe it, is that we are yo-yoing. Even in my 10-year meditation practice, sometimes in my meditation, my mind, I'm in that gap. Other times I'm in rumination. Other times I'm feeling bliss. It's all of it. And so I think what we're working with in this program, and what we're working with anytime we're doing what I would call a contemplative practice, is we're trying to increase our capacity to hold all of it, to hold all of the complexity, to hold the fact that, yes, you can look at our society right now and it's a shit show, and you can have all the feelings for that. And then you can get on one of those news sites that I talked about and read all these stories. Like one of the stories that I read off of that site was that in the city of, I think it was in Denmark or Germany, they figured out a way how to plant trees in the city by creating like a different root system so that the roots don't go down into all of the pipes and all of the electric. They've created like some kind of thing to be able to plant all these beautiful trees. And so they're putting all these trees in this city, and it's increasing quality of life and more oxygen and making people happier. And so it's that idea of like, okay, I'm reading this and it's really horrible. Now I'm reading this and it's giving me hope, right? Like this is life. This is life. So can we create our capacity to hold all of it and still be in that center? So I showed a slide last week about, can we find that still center where whatever's going back and forth, there is a still center as we hold all of it. So thank you, Dawn, for sort of clarifying Allie's question a little bit more. I hope that was helpful. Yeah, and then Alina asked about any tips for struggling with self-sabotage. She said it's a facet of complex PTSD that I'm personally hoping to soften and diminish. Yeah. Yeah, self-sabotage. I would say that for all of us and for all of our brains, we do go into self-sabotage, and it is more intense if you have a history of trauma. So similar to the question that I think Patricia asked about, um, do we have more negativity bias when things are stressful? Yes. Do we have more negativity bias when we've had trauma in our life? Yes. So first of all, just understanding that there is self-sabotage and it's real is half the battle or part of the battle. So much of, I'm just going to take it back to where we just were, right? This, holding our capacity. So part of what we're developing when we meditate, when we work in, again, these contemplative practices, is we're developing that witness. It takes me back to this slide. Let's go back to this slide because I think it's worth revisiting as we answer this question. Oop, that was not the slide I wanted. All right, it's this one. So when we self-sabotage, we're very much like embroiled in being the actor on the stage. So much of the contemplative work is just continuing to grow your capacity to witness your life, be the neutral observer, see, there we go again. I'm in negative self-sabotage. There I am again, reaching for my third banana nut muffin. There I go again. You know, we start to, when you're willing to work with witnessing your own life, you can't help but begin to see the patterning, to begin to see the people you keep getting drawn to begin to see the responses that come up in this situation over and over and over again. And so it's not easy work. Oh my gosh, being the witness, watching ourselves, understanding our patterning. It's not easy work. So I don't want to simplify it and just say, well, just be the witness of your life, because it's a practice, and like anything, we grow into it over time. We develop our capacity for it over time. But being the witness takes us out of the judgment of whatever's happening. Being the witness allows us to just have a little bit more space there. Just listening to see if there's anything else to be said about self-sabotage, except for the fact that it happens. It happens to everyone. It happens most likely more if you have more of a dysregulated nervous system. And so all of these tools of getting back into the body, being present, developing your still center, watching when you get dysregulated, watching when you're regulated, knowing that you are the sky and all the weather patterns that come through, all the clouds, all the wind, all the rain is just life, but it's not you. You are the expansive blue sky, and all those weather patterns coming in, they will come and they will go. Doesn't feel like a very satisfying answer to me, Alina. But I think there is this piece of being accepting of all the parts of ourselves, even the self-sabotaging part. What I've learned over the years in my own process as well, that I want to cut out parts of myself that I don't like. I want to cut out the self-saboteur, saboteur. I want to cut out the victim part of myself. I want to cut out the whiny, bitchy part of myself. And I've tried over the years. Like, I'm just going to burn this. I'm going to release this. And it's still there. It's always still there. Why is it still there? Because nothing, energy cannot be destroyed. It can only transmute and transform into something else. And so I have found in my own practice, and also I would say in more of my study of parts psychology, that we can't ever get rid of parts, just like with neuroplasticity, we can't get rid of old patterning. We can't erase it. It stays in us. We can't erase the traumas, but we can replace that patterning with something that's more functional and something that um, works in a more beneficial way for us. So we can't destroy these parts, but we can see them, we can accept them, and sometimes just by the viewing and the seeing them for what they are, some of their power diminishes. So I hope there's something in that that maybe speaks to you. Yeah, the wisdom of the group added in here. Michelle added in. So Lena, you can know that you're not alone. And I'm also part of that group. Michelle says, I'm a master at self-sabotage. And what I've learned to do, or I'm learning to do, is give myself grace. Learn to be kind to myself, say nice, supportive things, appreciate myself for the little things I do that get me closer to my goals, baby steps that lead me towards my goals. So thank you for sharing that wisdom as well. And sweet Alina said, your sky analogy made me cry. So I think I got something there. Thanks for that feedback, Alina. Any other questions about the mind? And I didn't give you any particular soul work for tonight. It's because I wasn't quite sure which direction to take it. And I feel like Andrea is doing such a beautiful job of pulling out powerful questions based on the conversation and bringing them to you on Friday. So I thought to myself, see where Andrea takes this, but they will definitely be writing prompts based on your relationship to your mind coming out on Friday. Anything else, Tend Her crew, that you want to ask? And I will say, I think I said this before, but I'll say it again. The best way to work with the mind is through meditation, because we can't necessarily control the mind, but we can quiet the mind. And so if you walk away from anything in this 4-week class of Tend Her, my encouragement is to meditate, 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 meditate. It really does shift our minds in a profound and powerful way that is really beyond words. So that's going to be my final thought. All right, everyone. Oh, there's another good little chunk of wisdom that this collective powerful group is putting out there. Thank you, Patricia, for that. Order self-care without the side of guilt. I like that. So engage in those things that make you feel better without the added side of guilt. That's perfect. All right, everyone. Much love. Know that your mind is malleable and that you have great potential for creativity and curiosity. And just those things alone can really offset that negativity bias and that rumination. So stay with it. Like, none of us shift overnight and none of us ever get it all right. We are all in a process called life in this earth school that somehow we've all incarnated into together at the same period of time. So that makes it a little easier knowing we're not alone. So, all right, much love to everyone. And if put this last one up if you're interested at all in, oh my gosh, I've got 2 more slides that I forgot, 3 more slides I forgot to tell you about. Bonus class this Wednesday is Dr. Rachel McLaren. She's amazing. She's a communications professor, and she does a lot of research on children and emotions. And she is going to talk with us on Wednesday night if you have children and families. Caregiving is really challenging for sure. I know that. And how to be a source of hope for our children and teens when they're having hard times. So that's Wednesday. There's our narrative therapy that'll come out on Friday. And then there's so many cool glimmer events this week, you guys. There's a special outdoor mandala thing on Saturday. There's a frock swap where you bring your old clothes to the studio and then you can pick out other people's clothes that they want to get rid of. There is a drum circle this week. There is at another studio in town, there's like yoga and acupuncture together. I think there's all kinds of stuff. So it's all on this Glimmer events page if you want to engage in some of that. And then there's our Hope Summit. So if you haven't signed up yet and you want to come, we'd love to see you. Okay, that was the end of my slides. I can't believe I forgot those. All right, everyone. Much love to everyone. I appreciate all of you for showing up. Your energy and your questions invigorate me and sort of keep me going. So I appreciate your presence tonight. All right, everyone. We will see you next week.